So we have some important news on the current efforts to remove suppressors and short-barreled rifles from the NFA nationwide. So let's break down what just happened. Now, real quick, if you're watching this channel, then obviously it's safe to say that you care about the Second Amendment and your rights. Now, here's the thing, even law-abiding gun owners are ending up in jail because they make a bunch of critical mistakes. And those are mistakes that you don't even realize that you're making or that you don't understand that they're illegal. So I put together a free resource called the Legal Survival Guide. It's aimed to help you guys avoid all of those traps that maybe you could fall in. It takes about 2 minutes to read. It's just a simple PDF, and it really could save you years behind bars. I made it to help you guys, again, completely free to download using the link down below. It's just something that I wanted to provide to you guys for free so that you can have it in your phone or maybe print it out. And there's a little card also in there that you can put in your wallet to give you additional resources to help you in situations. Obviously, not meant to be legal advice. I'm not your attorney. This isn't an attorney-client relationship, but I wanted to provide you guys some free resources to prevent you falling in some bad situations. Again, if you're interested, click the links down below. It's completely free to do. All you have to do is enter your email to get that free PDF. As I mentioned in the intro, in this video, we need to talk about what is currently happening right now in response to the Hearing Protection Act and the Short Act, the full versions not getting passed in HR 1, but essentially the $0 tax passing and what has now been the ramifications and what have been the two-way responses. Now, if you've been following the channel for a while, you know that recently HR 1 passed the Big Beautiful Bill, so that is now law, and in that was a reduction of the NFA tax. Under the new law, which goes into effect at the beginning of next year, the NFA tax of these items will now be reduced from $200 to $0. Unfortunately, rhinos in Congress were not willing to press this issue and get the full versions of the Short Act and the Hearing Protection Act that we actually wanted. They only included the $0 tax in there. And they were also unwilling to remove the Senate parliamentarian who was responsible for striking out the full versions of the language that we wanted. One of the things that we were also concerned about was the response from the Democrats, where we knew that maybe they would try to use this same strategy. And actually right now there was a bill that was introduced. It was submitted to Congress. That was from Senator Chris Murphy. And that was introduced to essentially take the NFA tax and that requirement from the current $200 all the way up to $4,709 per stamp. So the Democrats are taking action in response to the NFA tax change, but now multiple two-way organizations have also launched challenges to remove suppressors and SBRs from the NFA outright. GOA, FRAC, Palmetto State Armory, Silencer Shop, and all these other organizations joined together to file a lawsuit against the ATF, and that one's in the Northern District of Texas. However, now another lawsuit has now been launched. This one is FBC, SAF, the NRA, and ASA. They have joined together to file a similar lawsuit, and this one is in the Eastern District of Missouri. So this one will be under the 10th Circuit's jurisdiction. Now, in this lawsuit filed by SAF and the other groups, they argue that Congress passed the NFA explicitly premised on the enumerated power to lay and collect taxes, and the Supreme Court upheld provisions of the NFA on that basis, holding that the NFA was only a taxing measure and that the registration provisions were obviously supportable as an aid of the revenue purpose. Indeed, the court has described the NFA as an interrelated statutory system for the taxation of certain classes of firearms. That constitutional basis, however, has recently been eliminated with respect to the making, transferring, and receiving of several items which are defined as firearms by the NFA, including suppressors, short-barreled rifles, short-barreled shotguns, thus making the NFA's restrictions on these items unconstitutional as applied to those arms. They go on to state that the Big Beautiful Bill signed into law by the president on July 4th, 2025, eliminated the making and transfer taxes on suppressors, short-barreled rifles, short-barreled shotguns, and the NFA defined any other weapons while leaving the registration requirements intact. In other words, individuals no longer have to pay taxes for making and transferring most firearms under the NFA, but the firearms are still required to be registered and are subject to the web of regulation that was designed to aid enforcement of the NFA's now extinct tax. This regulatory regime, they state, no longer comports with Congress's constitutionally enumerated powers. While the NFA's regulations may have been permissible in support of the statute's taxes on making and transferring firearms, that justification no longer remains for items whose making and transferring are no longer taxed. To the extent that the NFA imposes requirements on making, transferring, receiving, possessing, or otherwise using untaxed firearms, it cannot be justified as an exercise of any other Article 1 power. Accordingly, the NFA is unconstitutional as it applies to these now untaxed firearms. So in this lawsuit and in response to the NFA no longer being valid under Congress's taxing powers, the plaintiffs asked first for the court to declare that the NFA's requirements relating to the now untaxed firearms, including SBRs and suppressors, they asked for a finding that that exceeds Congress's taxing powers both facially and as applied. They also asked for the ATF, all of its officers and agents and other individuals in the government to be enjoined from enforcing the NFA and any of its regulations relating to the NFA. In summary, what SAF and the other orgs asked for in this challenge is for the court here to declare that the NFA's registration and transfer requirements pertaining to these now untaxed firearms, they want a finding that that exceeds Congress's enumerated powers, and they ask for the court here to enjoin the ATF and all of its employees and agents from implementing and enforcing the NFA to these specific firearms. So that is the new lawsuit that was launched in response to the $0 tax change. It aims to do similar things to the other one that was filed in the Northern District of Texas. However, this lawsuit was filed in the Eastern District of Missouri, which is a federal court, and that sits under the 10th Circuit's jurisdiction. The 10th Circuit has been pretty good when it comes to two-way issues. They haven't got all the cases right. In my opinion, they haven't gotten all of them right, but they have been a favorable, circuit court. So this is a good jurisdiction to file in, and it kind of adds to a 1-2 punch where you already have an NFA challenge down in the 5th Circuit's jurisdiction, and now you have also one in the 10th Circuit. Now, one caveat to this challenge is that we don't know right now how the Trump ATF will actually respond to these challenges. Based on how they respond to this case, it could also maybe get a faster win if the Trump DOJ says, yes, we agree the $0 tax change, makes the whole structure of the NFA unconstitutional, but we don't necessarily know that the Trump DOJ is going to do anything like that. I would suspect that maybe they're going to do the same thing that they did in the Peterson Suppressor challenge, where we saw them recently file a brief saying that they believe the registry and how that's structured is constitutional. It doesn't violate the Second Amendment. They believe that it's still lawful. However, they did say that a state cannot outright ban NFA items. So that was some interesting movement in favor of the Pro-2A cause from the Trump administration, but we don't necessarily know how they're going to respond to this specific challenge. So there's a lot of moving parts right now in this NFA battle. Lawsuits have been launched, and now Democrats are also launching bills to try to increase the NFA tax. But this is good movement. It's movement in the right direction. Now you have multiple cases filed in different jurisdictions challenging the NFA as it applies to suppressors and SBRs because of the $0 tax change. And now they're saying that it's unconstitutional and does not align with Congress's taxing powers or any other enumerated powers that Congress has. And so they cannot implement the NFA as it currently exists. So that's what's currently going on in response to the changes with the NFA tax that passed in the Big Beautiful Bill. These lawsuits are launched. They're going to move forward, and we're going to see how this ultimately develops. And these are some of the cases which I believe inevitably will have to get elevated to the circuit court level and then also potentially to the Supreme Court. But we have other cases right now in front of the Supreme Court also dealing with the NFA and SBR issues. So it's going to be interesting to see maybe how that impacts these cases as well. Because keep in mind, the Supreme Court also recently asked for a response from the Trump DOJ in one of those NFA SBR challenges that's pending in front of them. So that's interesting because it shows the Supreme Court is actually taking some sort of interest on this whole NFA SBR issue. So that could impact these challenges as well. So that's what's currently going on in response to all of this. As we get more information, as we get more details of how these are proceeding, I will let you guys know. If you like this video and you would like to support the channel, one of the best ways to do that is to simply subscribe to the channel. Also, you can check out my website, armscholar.com. We have a free legal guide over there. I will also link the free legal guide down below where you can get that. All you have to do is put in your email, and then we send you a PDF, and then also we do some follow-up emails with additional free education. So check out that, check out the website. But as always, thank you guys so much for all of your support. And don't forget, this nation was built by armed scholars, and this nation will be maintained by armed scholars.